Hi, Brittany. Thank you for being here today.
Yes, of course. I'm so excited.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Brittany Canizero. I am currently living in San Diego, California. I am an assistant director of residence life at UC San Diego. I've been in my position for about 5 years. I have a master's in counseling with an emphasis in student development. And yeah, my position intersects a lot with college aged kids. I actually live on campus, so that's a really fun thing to do in your mid 30s. And I deal with a lot of crisis intervention. I am a bit of the go between before first responders show up for big crises. And then I also do a lot of student development, leadership, and mentorship. So super fun.
Wonderful. Yeah, sounds like it. So, what advice do you have for parents when their student is going off to a college, a university, a trade school? How can the parents best support their student?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I work especially with first years, so I do see this a lot. I think a lot of times parents in their own anxiety, they bring that to move in, they bring that to their child where most often I see either the helicopter parent that is like overly hovering or I'll see where the parents will do more than they should, where they'll be over involved, or they'll be making all the calls, they'll be filling out the roommate questionnaire of like, is Billy a neat roommate or is he messy? And then the parents will be like, oh, he's clean. Billy's actually messy. And so there's just some over involvement there that can cause some friction. I think learning that while we are very aware that transitioning into university is more often than not the biggest transition of this student's life up until this point. And so giving grace for that moment and that season, but also to let them lean into their adult development and to become their own identity outside. I mean, it's kind of their like launch pad moment from like families and living at home. They don't have, home cooking anymore. Like they start to learn how to fend for themselves. So I think my best advice would be to like be communicative with both ways, with the student with their families and then the family with their student, of like kind of what they're feeling, what's going on, to acknowledge the big transition that it is, but to also encourage parents to let their kid surprise you a little bit with, hopefully, with the initiative that they take.
That's some great advice. So, what about for whether you're the student, the child, young adult? How do you support your child in choosing going to a trade school, a college, a a university, a community college? How do you know what is best, or how do you help your child decide what schooling is best for them?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a lot of factors at play. And so I've worked in higher education for like 12 years. And I think there is so many strategies when approaching picking a college that, again, I think takes a lot of intentionality, and it depends on your priorities. Some students are like, you know what, I got to get away from home. I grew up on the West Coast. I'm going on the East Coast. I don't care where I'm going. Where location might be a priority. A lot of families do wherever they can get the best financial aid package. For some students, it's about the offering of the major offerings. Is that major impacted or not? Is there going to be an ease in terms of registering for classes so that they can graduate in 4 years? Because graduation time is real, and there are some universities that are so impacted that students struggle to get classes and then they can't graduate in time, and they got to bank on being 5 and 6 years in to do an undergraduate work. For some folks, moving away from home doesn't work for them, and sometimes like commuting in works best. There really is no right answer, which I kind of love, and I think that students and families get to pick for themselves. If you don't want to commit to a major just yet, a trade school is a great option. If you want to pursue a passion or some skill that you want to try a trade, I think the older I get, the more I realize that you don't have to know at 18 what you're going to do for the rest of your life. I felt that pressure at 18, so I'm very empathetic to that pressure. But you don't, it's not true. So I think also with costs of higher education, just sky high, I understand completely why people would want to do 2 years at community college and transfer in. It buys them time, and can also be most strategic depending on the family. However, like there also is the drawback of not getting the 4-year college experience at university. And if you transfer in as a junior, your experience is going to be a lot more of a grind than if you were to come in as a first year and get to experience like the fun of college when you have the least amount of pressure on you. I could talk for a while about that, so I'll just stop there.
So it seems like really looking at what are you hoping to gain from the experience of a higher education.
Exactly.
Okay. So any suggestions for building community while at a university?
Yeah. I think that can also be a deciding factor on like where students do choose to go. I think, and it sounds cliche to say get super involved, but I think that there are so many resources that a lot of students don't take advantage of, either because they don't know or they don't necessarily put in a ton of effort to find them. I work on the back end in student affairs, so I help train student leaders to reach out to the students that live with them to try and get them plugged in, even if they're not. Of course, we do our best, but there's definitely students who slip through the cracks. Like if you don't want to get involved, no one's going to force you and no one's going to hold your hand. Again, the adult development piece that comes with being an adult in college. But I think that generally speaking, universities and community colleges, I can't speak attended trade school as far as my experience, but I think there are resources and departments in place specifically designed to help students plug in. And you never know who you're going to meet when you plug in. I've seen countless times students might click with a professor that's the advisor of a club, and then that person writes their letter of rec for med school. Maybe a provost begins to mentor you, things like that, where the connections into lab work, internships, things like that, where all can be positives of getting involved, on top of course, like social interaction. And the studies are everywhere that like the more connected you are, the more social you are, the more connected to the university or college or community college you feel, the better you do, the more motivated you are in school, all of the things it trickles down.
Yeah, so it sounds like building that community and that social connection is so important, not just for the mental and emotional health, but also for future connections.
Yes.
So what do you notice students struggling the most with while at university?
Yeah.
And how can parents support their student through that process?
Another great question. I think what we are seeing kind of nationally is mental health issues are skyrocketing. It's very commonplace. On the one hand, I think it's great that mental health conversations are becoming less stigmatized. But I think it's also making us realize, especially as staff at universities, that there is a huge need and a gap in support. And most of the time, the counseling and psychological services on campuses are so full. Students are still not getting as quick of help as you'd like. And it's systemic, like the places are understaffed. And so a lot of times universities and colleges are referring out, which then can cause, if they don't have transportation, there can be also hurdles and roadblocks in that way. But I think we're seeing absolutely numbers for depression are high, numbers for anxiety are high. I think that, and those are just like two off the top. I think what we forget just like societally is how much pressure there is on these younger generations, how competitive everything is. And like I said, I work a lot with 18 and 19-year-olds. They come in with dreams, especially at UCSD, very STEM heavy. But they come in with dreams of being neurosurgeons, and they are grinding beyond anything I've ever seen or anything I was ever capable of at 18 developmentally. So naturally, they're not sleeping very well. They're pulling all-nighters left and right. It kind of becomes this badge of honor while they're at school to like, oh, well, I haven't slept in 36 hours because I was cramming so hard, but I got an A on my final. And then that is applauded rather than like, you really need sleep. And so there's this culture that does feel very widespread that, you know, these poor mental health habits are fine as long as you get the grade, because you need the grade, you want to go on to advanced school, either grad school, med school, etc. And you have to, you got to get a good MCAT score, you got to get a good LSAT score. And if you don't, you failed. And I think that pressure just weighs so heavy on them and it shows up for them mentally. So super common. And I think it's easy for people who are not in that phase or don't have a child that they love going through it, are unaware and can make judgment calls that are incredibly unfair.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is possibly helping with some of the barriers to getting the mental health services, and also hopefully before going away to school, teaching the importance of getting enough sleep, enough exercise, enough nutrition, and really that self-care.
Yeah, I think the way that I think is the most healthy is for parents to kind of view it as like you're a team with your child. And that doesn't mean you're over involved, but it doesn't mean you're unaware. And I think, I mean, when I hear of students that are like, oh, I have a weekly check-in with my family, I'm like, that's beautiful. Love that. That's great. Where parents can get a pulse on their kid, you know, better than me as a stranger would. But that they can be on tabs of asking those questions as someone who loves them, to just exactly what you were saying. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you truly taking care of yourself? You know, and to do those constant check-ins. And when you're catching wind of potential issues arising, not being afraid to get your students some outside help. Because I think there's, as I've had conversations with students, when they've had to get medicated for different things, it's consistently, I've heard that it's very hard for parents and families to accept that their child might need additional, even medicinal support, even if it does really help their student. And there's some cultural things that can show up in that as well, to complicate it a little bit more. But I think all of those things are on the rise.
Well, thank you so much for all of this insight and wisdom. So thank you for being here today, Brittany. And for those of you at home, if you haven't yet subscribed to Mind and Body Pilates, a wellness approach, please do so by clicking on the logo below so that you don't miss out on any future Pilates classes and interviews. Thank you, Brittany.
Of course.